Well, again, hi everyone. Thank you for being here today with us. The title of my presentation today is The Identity of Dracula, Who is the Vampire in Bram Stoker's Dracula. The topic, let me see if this works, sorry. Wow, why does this not work? Yeah, this works. Okay, the topic of the presentation would be to analyze Dracula's identity, the character Dracula, Dracula's identity with focus on Bram Stoker's novel. And I will discuss only about Dracula as a character in Stoker's novel. I have here a list of references, which I will be referring to during my presentation. This is this is for starters. This is a cover, a double cover. This is of the same book. The first one is the original one. Well, the original one has been sold in 2002 with for a sum of $47,000, as you see. And the last one, well, as you see, it's a very sought for novel. And the second cover is the cover of the same book, but it's the, I don't know, it's the newest. It's not the newest, but it's probably one of the most interesting or popular or pop cultural presentation of the novel. The novel which is presented by the Penny Dreadful collection. The topic also contains a little discussion about the novel itself. The novel has been published in 1897. A little bit about this, the novel. The novel presents the protagonist, which is the Count Dracula from Transylvania. He is the vampire, the undead one, who seeks a new home in England so that he can find blood, fresh blood, in order to survive in his monstrous parasitic afterlife, so that he can also create a new race of vampirized and vampirizing victims. A little bit about the novel also with reference to the characters. The novel reports Dracula's trip to England and also reports the going back of Dracula to Transylvania in a very interesting twist, because it is a hunt for the hunter. The second part of the novel is the hunt of the hunter itself, is the hunt of the hunter by these characters in the novel. The secondary characters are two young women, and the most important female characters in the novel. Mina Murray, she's a schoolmistress, and she's the fiancée of the lawyer, Jonathan Harker. And Lucy Westenra, she is Mina's friend. She's one of the most interesting secondary character in the novel. Actually, the novel gives a lot of importance and a lot of space to this character. She will become a victim of Dracula's vampirism, and she will be slayed after her death in a ritual of vampire slaying performed with the purpose of redeeming her soul. There are also the five male characters. The American, Quincy Morris, the British, John Stewart. He is the administrator of the asylum, the insane asylum. There is also the guru of the novel, the doctor, Abraham van Helsing. He is Dutch. He is described as half philosopher, half scientist, half philosopher, half scientist, and half madman in a way. He is the modern medicine man of the novel. He is a self-described specialist in the occult. Jonathan Harker, he's a solicitor. He is the one related with Mina Murray. He's the lawyer. He's the first secondary character appearing in the book, the first who encounters Dracula in the novel and at his castle and becomes his prisoner. Arthur Holmwood, he's one related to Lucy. He is the son of Lord Godalming. He is Lucy's fiancé. He's the first to offer Lucy a blood transfusion. He's also an interesting character. In addition, the novel presents less important characters such as Renfield. He is Seward's mental patient, obsessed with hunting and eating small living creatures like insects, birds, etc. He's a sort of a mime of Dracula's behavior. He's very much influenced by Dracula in the novel. And Lucy's mother, Mrs. Westerham. She dies and she is buried alongside her daughter. The novel also reports the battle between this small group of characters and Dracula, which results in the end in the destruction of the vampire count. Something about vampire literature and vampire folklore. There is a very large literature about this. I will describe and present only some hints about this. In 17th and 18th century folklore, vampires are already appearing and are already being registered by modern authors. The first account of a vampire is in 1689. So actually, the written accounts of vampires appear around the beginning of the Enlightenment age. There are some works which make direct historical references to cases of vampirism, which are not, well, which are actually somehow between fiction and history. There is the Voyage to the Levant of Joseph Piton de Tournefort. He's the botanist of King Louis XIV in 1702. There is the work by Michael Ramft, De Masticatione Mortum, in 1728, where the life of a peasant from Kisilova is described as being the life of a vampire. He was described as preferring to victimize his family. He, quote, lies on top of the victims and either throttles them or bites their chest. This allegedly vampire was staked and burned, but he was really staked and burned according to this account. In 1732, another account is registered from the region of Medvedja in Austrian Serbia, and in 1746 there is the famous work of Augustin Calmet, abbot of Senon, treatise on the vampires of Hungary and surrounding regions. This is one of the sources of Bram Stoker's novel. He accounts of the epidemics of vampirism, which treats as posthumous magic, appearing in regions such as Hungary, Moravia, Silesia, and Poland. He sees these accounts as appearing from, quote, the imagination of the living and their prejudices. Actually, this is the middle of the 18th century, where the accounts about vampirism are described as mere superstition. But from these historical, semi-historical, semi-fictional accounts appeared in the 19th century, especially appeared very rich literature about vampirism, which became part of the English and French and German Gothic literature. There are some accounts about vampires in the regions of nowadays Romania. For example, there is the work by Carl von Spaxman, The Mysterious Stranger. And actually, this is literature, this is not historical account. In 1844, the character is Count Aco von Klatka. He is coming from the Carpathian Mountains. There is the novel by Alexandru Dumas, The Pale-Faced Lady. You have there a male aristocrat named Kostaki. He is coming from the Carpathian Mountains in Moldavia, and he is deemed a vampire. In 1865, we have Reverend Sabine Bering Gould, The Book of Werewolves, where Elizabeth, the famous Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian aristocrat, is described as coming from the foothills of the Carpathians and the lowlands of Hungary, and described as a vampire. Although Elizabeth Bathory was a real character and also a bloody one. In 1893, we have a novel by Julian Oswald Field, The Kiss of Judas, where the vampire is actually a Jew. named Isaac Lebedenko. He's male. He acts in Constantinople and in the Karpak mountains in Moldavia. So the mountains are not spelled correctly. Also in the 19th century, we have a very long list of vampire literature, starting with Heinrich von Kleist in 1805, the Marquis of O, and the Penthesilea from 1808. This last one is the one where the vampire bites her lover to death. She's a female vampire. In 1819, we have the famous novel of John Polidori, who is the friend of Byron. The novel Vampire. The main character is Lord Ruthven. This is the first Byronic vampire and the foundation of the genre, actually. There is also the work by Byron, the fragment of a story written in 1816. There is Etta Hoffmann, the German writer, with his novel, The Serapion Brothers. The vampire is Aurelia. She is a baroness from the most beautiful country imaginable. We have Prosper Mérimée in 1827 with La Guzla. The vampire is the Bey of Moina. He's an aristocrat. In 1833, we have Edgar Allan Poe with Berenice. Berenice, there she's a female aristocrat. We have Gogol in 1835 with V. The vampire is the daughter of a wealthy Cossack. In 1836, we have Gautier with La Mort Amoureuse. The vampire is Clarimond. She's a female and royal courtesan. In 1840, we have the novel by Alexis Tolstoy, The Family of the Vurdala. The vampires are Gocha and Zdenka. They are male and female peasants from a village in Moldavia. So we have vampires from various regions of nowadays Romania, Moldavia, or Transylvania. We have the novel, another novel by Dumas. No, the same novel, sorry, by Dumas, The Pale-Faced Lady. We have the Metamorphose du Vampire of Baudelaire. And the vampire is a woman with a strawberry mouth, he says. We have the famous novel Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. This is also one of Stoker's sources. The vampire is Countess Carmilla Karnstein. The theme of the novel is vampiric female homoeroticism. In 1887, we have Guy de Maupassant with the Orla in French. The vampire is Orla. Is a visitor encountered in an ancestral home by the set. And in the end, we have in 1897 the famous Dracula by Bram Stoker, where the vampire is named Count Dracula. So actually, the Dracula is the last. If one can see, Dracula is the last in this line of rich vampire literature. Well, famous rich, because there are also others, but they are less important. So our question for this conference was and is still, who is Bram Stoker's Dracula? I will talk about the identity of Dracula, actually the nature of Dracula, as an ambiguous and abhorrent nature. The abhorrency of Dracula, you know it already, but I will describe more the ambiguous nature of the character Dracula. Dracula is undoubtedly the most complex character of the novel. He first lives a double life, or a dual life, as the novel describes. The first one is the life of an ancient aristocrat, obsessed with his ancestry and mourning the loss of ancient warrior virtues. Another is the life of a monstrous vampire who survives and procreates in an almost timeless existence by sucking the blood of his victims. On the whole, Dracula is and may be described as a liminal entity, an entity at the margins. Why? Because of many things. First, he is undead. He spreads death in order to have not life, but undead life. He lives historical time by surviving in an extemporal manner, so he is almost immortal. He is prolific, but not by reproducing himself, but by spreading the disease of his vampirism. So we have all these ambiguous aspects of Dracula. Also, his taking of blood is not to the purpose of life, but to the purpose of death. Actually, what he lives is a death, but not a death exactly, but an undeath, to be precise. However, undeath, the state of undeath, undying, is not life, it is just being animated in a lifeless body. And this is confirmed, this existence, which resembles a zombie existence or a post or an after human existence, is confirmed by the novel itself, which says at some point that this character, this vampire, is without heart or conscience, preying on the bodies and the souls of those we love best. So we already have we already have the signs of an entity which is not a human entity. It is more like a less than human entity. Either way, it's not human at all in this state. Also, Dracula's offsprings, the products of Dracula's vampirism, are not progenies, they are victims. Actually, he does not reproduce. He's like a little bit like a virus. He replicates, and what he replicates is precisely his own undeadlessness. So his own weakness, actually. We'll see. About his nature, we have already established that his nature is post or after human and not human-like. Also, paradoxically, he creates a new race not by breeding a new race, but by destroying another race. So he doesn't breed a new race, he destroys another race, and he doesn't breed a new race because this new race, even if it exists, it's not entirely living. In the end, Dracula breeds ghosts. Dracula's breeding is not real, but it's nihilistic because it's a breeding of ghosts. It is a breeding by destruction and not by reproduction, by fecundity. He's not giving life, he's taking life, although he is spreading he's spreading for himself in a way, or founding a family. He multiplies or he replicates exactly as a parasite by invading the healthy body and soul of another real human being. But a real parasite creates offsprings, whereas the post-human parasite, which is Dracula, replicates. He is thus not only a destroyer of bodies, but also a corrupter of souls, since he ultimately does not let the soul seek their peaceful living or not even their peaceful death. About the origins of Dracula, this is one of the most interesting things about Dracula, which one can find out from the novel itself and from the reading of some passages in the novel. Dracula is as a novel character, is proud of his ancestry right from the start, right from the first chapters when he enters into dialogue with Harker, but does not have a clear origin. His dialogue with Harker on the origin of his ancestors acknowledges the virtues of his ancestors because he's a dead historical aristocrat, but is not able to indicate the specific unique nation or origin of his ancestors. He says that he himself is a Seke in the novel, but he mentions Wallachian princes of the Dracula clan as having done heroic things in the past. Contrary to other interpretations of historians, such as Florescu and McNally, who go to great lengths to demonstrate the direct connection between Dracula the Count and the historical Vlad Tepes, as we know, our interpretation focuses on the ambiguity of Dracula's origin and speculates that Stoker may have deliberately kept the confusion about Dracula's past, and not because he was completely ignorant of Dracula's Tepes, as Elizabeth Miller's book from 2000 suggests. The book is called Dracula Sense and Nonsense. Some facts about Vlad the Impaler. You may know them or you may not know them, so that's why I will present them here shortly. Vlad Tepes, which is usually nowadays identified as Vlad Dracula, or as the character, or more precisely as the character of the novel, is or was called Vlad III, or called Vlad Țepeș, known also as Vlad Dracula. Dracula comes from the name Dracula, which actually means in Romanian son of Dracul. Dracul was nobility surname, was not the name of the devil, although it may sound like this. It was actually the name of the nobility name of Vlad's father. Vlad III, or Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Țepeș, was a voivode of medieval Wallachia. Wallachia was a province bordering Transylvania. He lived from 1431 to 1476, a very short life, ruled in 1448, 1466 to 1462, and 1476, so the reign of Vlad Țepeș was not long. Vlad ruled three times over the southern province of nowadays Romania, named Wallachia, as voivode, as lord. During his reigns, Wallachia was under the Ottoman influence. It was not an Ottoman province per se, yet its rulers were controlled by the Sultan. The province also had to pay a hefty annual tribute to the Ottoman court. More facts about Vlad the Impaler. He had connections, political connections, and historical connections to Transylvania. First, he was allegedly born in Transylvania, in the town of Sighișoara, in 1431, and died in 1476 at the age of 45. Yes, he spent several years of his youth, from 1442 to 1447, as a prisoner of the Ottoman Sultan in order to make safe his father's allegiance to the Turks. Vlad's father, Vlad II, or Vlad Dracul, not Vlad Dracula, but Vlad Dracul, he was the original member of the Dracula family. He had been rewarded with the Order of the Dragon. That's where the name Dracul comes, awarded to him by the King of Hungary. Vlad Țepeș's father was a court official, to the Hungarian court at some point. He was under the protection of the king, and his duty was to protect the border cities of Southern Transylvania in the name of the King of Hungary. Vlad Țepeș himself, the son, was married 2 times with Transylvanian noblewomen. First one was a lady called from the family of Batory, and the second one was Justina Silagi de Horogșec. His heirs will carry on the nobility name Dracula, and will also be part of the Hercegi, or Hungarian noble families. There's the family of Silagi de Horogșec. Thus, Vlad and the father of Vlad held political and family connections with the royal court of Hungary, and this is a very interesting aspect which will come in our presentation. More facts about him. During his second reign in Wallachia, he attacked the outskirts of the border city of Transylvania because, well, it's a long story, but this story is made very short. He attacked the Saxon towns of southern Transylvania, and because of his attacks and because of his reputation as a ruthless leader, these atrocities which he perpetrated upon the Saxon population will be registered by the German-Saxon Chronicles and will become part of the Central European folklore regarding Dracula as a ruthless ruler. At some point, the legends talk about his inclination to drink the blood of his victims. So this is probably one of the sources of Stoker's idea of describing a vampire which is called, or which is somehow in some way related to the voivode Vlad Dracula. In 1459, during his second reign, he refused to pay the tribute to the Ottoman court. He became allied to the King of Hungary, Matthias Corvinus. But however, in 1462, after he fled to Transylvania because of the Turks, the King of Hungary had him arrested on suspicion of spying for the Turks. So he will be held prisoner in the royal town of Visegrad for 14 years, from 1462 to 1475. Eventually, he was released and went to Pest, to Budapest, and then to Transylvania. With the help from the Hungarians, he regained the throne in 1462. However, his rival to the throne of Wallachia, Basarab-Lajos, came back to Wallachia escorted by the Turks, and killed Vlad in a battle fought in December 1476. This is all in very short terms, all about Prince Vlad the Impaler. We'll see the connection of these elements with the description which is found in the novel. In the novel Dracula, Stoker ambiguously throws Slav into the picture when he speaks about the nationalities Harker encounters in Transylvania during his trip. Although he clearly knew that Transylvania was peopled by, the author clearly knew that Transylvania was peopled by only 4 major nations, with none of which were Slavic origin. Also, he makes Dracula declare that he is a Sekui or a Seke, a secular, which he may well have been as an offspring of the Dracula clan, who were also noble seculars. But this just adds to the confusion related to the court and to the council and his identity. In the sense that, is it that Stoker wanted to suggest that Dracula, the count, the character described in the novel, was actually a descendant of Cepes, a descendant who was also a secular noble, or was it Cepes himself, or was it Cepes' father? We'll see. But this would only strengthen our suggestion that Stoker did not want to make Dracula disambiguous about his origins. On the contrary, in fact, the historians Florescu and McNally do specify in their book that Cepes, because of his wife, his secular wife, will establish a Romanian secular noble bloodline. The offsprings of Cepes will have Romanian or Wallachian, but also Hungarian or secular nobility names. See the work of McNally and Florescu, Dracula, Prince of Many Faces from 1999. There is a very interesting fragment at the beginning of the novel where Dracula addresses to the lawyer, Harker, in a speech where he tries to explain to Harker his historical ancestry. And he says, quote, "We Sekes," Seke is the Hungarian name for secular, "have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races who fought as the lion fights for lordship. Here, in the whirlpool of European races, which is the East is seen as multiracial, the Ugric tribe, the ancestors, bore down from Iceland the fighting spirits which tore and wood in gate. It is a wonder that we were a conquering race, that we were proud, that when the Magyar, the Lombard, the Avar, the Bulgar, or the Turk poured his thousand on our frontiers, we drove them back. And when the Hungarian flood swept eastwards, the Sekes were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries were trusted the guardian of the frontier of Turkeyland, or of the Turkish Empire." This is actually a historical episode which is very accurately described in the novel. "Who was it but one of my own race," he says further down the speech. My own race, this refers to the fact that he is considering himself a Wallachian prince, most probably Cepes, possibly also Cepes' father, possibly a follower, an inheritor of Cepes, from the Cepes family, who as voivode crossed the Danube and beat the Turk on his own ground. This was a Dracula indeed, or a member of the Dracula nobility line. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother? This makes direct reference to a historical episode about the brother of Cepes, or the brother of the father of Cepes. Radu the Beautiful could be one of the characters referred to here. He was Cepes' brother, or the other character which could be referred to here is Cepes' uncle Alexandru Aldea, who behaved towards Cepes' father like Cepes' brother with respect to the liberally to the throne. So, was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them? Was it not this Dracula, in the sense that it was this Dracula noble, probably Cepes or his father, indeed, who inspired that other of the race, of his race, which is maybe Țepeș himself, or even Michael the Brave, as Florescu and McNally suggest, because this Michael the Brave was also of Dracula, of the Dracula noble line, who in a later age, again and again, brought his forces over the Great River into the Ottoman land, the Turkey land. Again, when after the Battle of Mohacs, this is a historical battle, we, Székelyes, threw off the Hungarian yoke, because without the Hungarian kingdom, the Székelyes lived independently in Transylvania. We of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders, because the Wallachian Dracula nobles were also Székely nobles, because of Țepeș and his father's marriage. For our spirit would not broke that we were not free. All young sir, the Székelyes and the Dracula, probably the Wallachian here referred to, as their heart's blood, their brains, and their swords, because here Țepeș and his father were also under the protection of the King of Hungary, and as vassal nobles, who in the case of Țepeș also married Székely noblemen, were protected the frontier. This is a direct reference to the role of Țepeș or Țepeș father. Came both the record that mushroom growths like the Habsburg and the Romans can never reach. And this is the end phrase. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great places are as a tale that is told. End of quote. This is a long quote, but I insisted on presenting it because this actually this presents my thesis. About the origins of Dracula, we have another reference in the novel, the reference by Van Helsing, who later in the novel, at the middle of the novel, tried to pinpoint Dracula's origin by focusing it on the figure of that voivode Dracula he speaks about. But he makes no further reference of the voivode Dracula as being blood or not. But even he himself is not completely, the character himself is not completely sure of his speculation. So the question of Dracula's origin remains unexplained. It remains a mystery in the novel. So all these Transylvanian nations which appeared in the Middle Ages intermingled during Harker's fictional trip through modern 19th century historical Transylvania. The German Saxons, the Romanians, the Magyars, the Székelyes, the Slavs, probably the Slavs, there were also Slavs there, I guess. The Gypsies also are only mentioned, but only as servants in the novel. Harker mentions, quote, queer words, many nationalities during his trip, quote, had I known the language, or rather languages, so he actually specifies that there are more than one language. There is more than one language spoken there. He declares exasperated by the bizarre, confusing nature of all the things he encounters in Transylvania. Later, he will mock the old local tradition about the roads and transportation, quote, not to be kept in too good order. Even nature there seemed strange, dark, mysterious, and bizarre. Our thesis is that Stoker makes Dracula sound ambiguous about his national or historical origins, but not about the noble origins of his ancestors, be they secular or Wallachian, since in the Middle Ages loyalty was directed to class, to nobility, not to the nation. And this is not just the ignorance of the author with reference to Transylvania, as it had been suggested, and that's because the historical information, though ambiguous, is too accurate in the novel, and that his sense of despair and melancholy surface when he mentions the modern age, the historical age, which he does not understand, the age where he lives as a ghost-like creature. So, the passage that may have been overlooked by critics is this one. The warlike days are over, blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great races are a tale that is told. The comment on this is that this is the thought of a medieval noble living in a modern age, and that which suggests that the heroic age of nobility is over, and that aristocrats such as himself can only live as decadents in this age, in this end of the 19th century age. The issue of the origin of Dracula remaining unmapped and unsolved coincides with Stoker's own projected anxieties towards a turbulent eastern past and present, sorry, which to a modern Western individual such as Harker, who is actually an alter ego writer, thinks in terms of modern races and nationalities. At the end of the 19th century, Western authors thought in terms of race and nationality, and thinks that this East may seem decadent in terms of history because it's made of all aristocrats, or primitive in terms of contemporaneity. Without doubt, the novel brings to the fore modern fin de siècle anxieties towards the intermingling of the races of East and West, intermingling which the conservative Stoker sees as decadent and self-destructive. Also about Dracula's origin, which are not just genealogical but also geographical, and geographically ambiguous. To the picture of the Dracula with impure origins, one may add the confusing, indescribable location of the castle Dracula, which is described as a vast, ruined castle. The castle is also bizarre and uncanny, and it is described as the birthplace of Dracula as vampire, as vampire. This is the name that the novel uses. The castle is the one place which is not mapped on Harker's maps. Castle Dracula has an unknown location. It is a no place which cannot be fixed, identified, or recognized. Quote by Harker, the lawyer. I was not able to light on any map or work giving the exact locality of the castle, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own ordnance survey maps, but I found that Bistritz, which is a real city, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. So it is a castle which is located around some historical real places, but is not exactly located. It is actually a no place. It can't be fixed. It has no fixed origins. So it goes into this pattern of describing Dracula's origin as being mysterious. It seems that Dracula has no geographical or genealogical fixed and unique point of origin. His birthplace and his origins are unknown, or, to say the least, confusing. On the other hand, Dracula, the stranger without origin and without an identifiable home, the decadent, is well aware of all the maps. On the other hand, he is well aware of all the maps of England, who possesses all the maps of England and all the people, and of all the people he will encounter. He knows everything about everyone there in England. This is an aspect that is typical to all the savages trying to penetrate the civilized world. They always seem to know more about us than we know about them. See the episode when Harker found the much used map of England in Dracula's cabinet marked near London, Exeter, and Woodbury. This is the idea of the savage being more savvy than the civilized. This is the idea which also is to be found in Rousseau, for example, in the 18th century French writer Rousseau, who in his discourse on inequality classifies the savage as being more savvy about the civilized than the civilized is about the savage. So in the end, Dracula's existence is a paradox, is full of paradoxes. He is first an animated corpse, he is a bricolacus. Although endowed with supernatural forces, his condition is also very mundane and horrifyingly frail. And he is very dependent on his mundanities. He is not immortal, although it may seem like immortal. No, he prolongs life in a sort of an altered state of life, but he's not immortal. He's not immortal. He is terrifyingly mortal sometimes, even sometimes more mortal than humans. He is literally shadows and dust. He's not infinite, neither in his life nor in his existence. His super forces are dependent on mundane elements, small, detailed, mundane elements. His supernaturality is dependent on mundane banalities. Moreover, his supernaturality makes him weaker than the human, because he is half rational, since he is driven by his parasitic drive, his urge to kill so as to feed himself. He has no self-control. He needs deceit to appear as human, so he cannot be human. He can be easily overcome and annihilated by a strong human mind which knows his weaknesses, such as Van Helsing is. So he is not infinite, he is finite. Sometimes he is more finite than the mortals themselves. He needs others, he needs victims in order to survive. He cannot survive by himself. So he is not independent, and the novel specifies this several times. He's not independent, he's not free. He's not free to control himself, he's not free to reason himself, and he's not free to sustain himself in life without his victims. He is dependent on his victims. That's why some of the expressionist directors of the 20th century were fascinated with Dracula's undead mortality. He is not the hero of his existence, he's more likely the victim of his existence, especially if this parasitic state has been transmitted to him not according to his will. He is actually a wretched shadow of a human existence. In a way, he is less than human, not more than human. He's not supernatural, he's less than human. He's supernatural in his powers, but also weak, parasitic, meager. His body is spine-chilling, but shrinked and lifeless, since he needs the blood of others to survive. So he cannot survive on his own. He can overpower humans, but he is also dependent on darkness and fresh blood. He spends the day as a corpse in a coffin. His vulnerability is also exposed by banal things such as garlic, which paralyzes his abilities. His demonic supernaturality makes him especially vulnerable to crucifixes and Bibles. He is most vulnerable during his paralyzed state, when he can easily be destroyed by a stake to the heart. If, as a supernatural being, he lives an extraordinary life of a formidable hunter for humans, his everyday needs and desires are beastly. They are teratological. As a supernatural force, he may be a demon, but as an everyday entity, he needs to live like a parasite, like a leech. This is an expression from the novel. He is double, even in his undead existence. He is not just double because he is a shadow of an aristocrat. He is double even in his undead existence, because as undead he is both supernatural and a very weak everyday entity. That's why we have all these kind of transitions of this liminal entity, because usually liminal entities are characterized by transitions, by transitional states. Dracula's origins and nature are ambiguous and normal, but his life and his actions are also full of bizarre transitions. The first one is the urban to rural transition, which is ambiguous. Dracula transits first from rural countryside to a semi-urban area of England. This is the first part of the novel. The novel describes the transition as reversible because the last part of the novel focuses on a travel back from England to Transylvania when the hunter becomes the hunted. The other one is the transition from supernatural to mundane, which is reversible. The supernatural mundane relationship is reversible and dialectical. The one thing is depending on the other. He will not be mundane if he will not be supernatural. Supernaturality is the only force that keeps him in existence. Also, he will not be supernatural if he will not be mundane in this particular sense. The frailty of his own corpse, his identity is his corpse, is the locus of his supernatural force. He cannot be supernatural outside his corpse, not his body. He doesn't have a body. Actually, he has a corpse. He is a living corpse. He is not a body. So his corpse is the locus of his force. So a supernatural element is actually dependent on the mundane element, which is less than human. So the corpse is the only authentic element that remains of him during the day when his supernaturally vanishes. He is also particularly debilitated because of his supernaturality. So his supernaturality is actually a curse. It's not a blessing, it's a curse. His corpse, because it is supernatural, is very sensitive to natural elements. As more supernatural he is, less human and bodily he becomes. For example, he is very sensitive to sunlight or substances. Also, parts of his body, for example, his heart, because the heart is, of course, the most human element in the human body. His heart is very sensitive to mechanical shock during his sleep. A single stake through his heart could destroy him. The third transition would be the one from extraordinary to everyday, which is already implied in what I have been presenting here. The relation is the same, dialectical and irreversible. He is extraordinarily supernatural spirit, but he lives his existence as an everyday monstrous and pitiable creature. He is no more than a parasite, a leech. He lives off the life of others, and he sometimes can change in a rat, a bat, a wolf. Yet he is still a creature living in the shadows. To sum up about his nature, Dracula has an ambiguous, monstrous, bizarre identity. His nature, origin, existence, actions, roles are bizarre. He has roles of human, human-like, animal, or force of nature. He can be, well, he can have the appearance of human, he cannot be human. So he can be human-like. He can be an animal, and he also can be a force of nature because he can also transform to dust. He is the representative of what Stoker feared most as an author, the decadent ambiguity of monsters, foreigners, savages coming from the East. Dracula is also the offspring of an intermingling of races, which comes from the East. He also wants to export this intermingling with his monstrous hunt for fresh human blood and innocent human souls. So this is all that I have been able to describe about his nature. I have some things, I don't know if you can bear with me, the last part, about Dracula today. Dracula today, as a pop cultural myth, is known as the Bloody Impaler. So we have this tendency to immediately make the connection, which is not very obvious, as I have tried to explain here, between the historical character and the fictional character. But Dracula as Bloody Impaler serves as a tourism icon in Romania for tourism operators, not just in Romania, but throughout all Eastern Europe. Part of the opening of the tourist markets in Eastern Europe is the exotico for the Western gaze. See the commentary by Duncan Light. This exotic for the Western gaze strategy attracts tourists, especially from Western Europe and North American continent. In other words, this strategy often proposes the re-orientalizing as a publicity stunt for the Western tourist. For example, there is such topic as a Dracula tourism, and this Dracula tourism is no exception to this strategy. This creates what Duncan Lights has described as an identity versus a situation where the modern state of Eastern Europe, not just Romania, are forced to accept Orientalizing as publicity strategy in order to generate revenue from local tourism, although this primitivization meaning association between real history and superstition or irrational fear, the example of Dracula is the best one, places of mystery or supernatural, sites of mysticism, remote and mysterious location, wild nature, extra right, ancient folk tales and dress, ancient customs, etc., is, quote, at odds with the country's sense of identity as a modern developed Romanian state. And this is not just about Romania, this is about all the states of Eastern and Central Europe. In the case of Dracula's pop culture icon, this strategy of primitivization addresses not only the character of Dracula, which is reduced to an evil tyrant such as Bloody Impaler, in other words, he is orientalized, but also to the territory described by Stoker's original novel as the birthplace of Dracula the Vampire, Transylvania. Alongside the monster protagonist, there is also the monster land, or the monster country, Transylvania. The territory in itself is primitivized, becomes a character in the narrative, and afterwards in the touristic fictional maps. Thus, tourism image strategies generally will reduce Transylvania to a few more or less positive, more or less monstrous, primitivistic cliches: beautiful life, wildlife, untamed nature, spectacular mountains, ancestral inhabitants, beautiful peasants, old castles, spectacular mountain roads, ancient local food, etc. So this is the picturesque, as we already described by the novel of Stoker, because the tourists want to see what they want to see. in visiting Transylvania. So the presence of Dracula as a globalized myth nowadays itself an effect. We can see that already is an effect of the Western gaze. The original novel was itself an exercise in Balkanism, in creating Balkan cliches. The book carries with it its own story of discourse, Balkanist discourse and of Western prejudice. See the commentary by Stefan. In other words, Transylvania itself becomes the other of Europe. It is, quote, the social and spatial other of the West. Stoker's Transylvania becomes, quote, a sinister, remote, and backward region where evil and the supernatural run wild. End of quote. Also, Transylvania, quote, is a border between the mundane and the extraordinary. All these kinds of fictionalizing are present here. Okay, this is the last part. This is the last part of the epilogue. So we can see that Dracula becomes a part of what has been described as the ghost tourism industry. The ghost tourism industry is well established in England, for example, in the city of Edinburgh or York. For example, the castle becomes an icon of the ghost tourism. The castle Bram was rebranded, renamed as a Dracula castle, and this was an act, quote, of appropriation by Western tourists and not by Eastern inhabitants. On their journey, tourists from abroad often relied on, quote, expectations, fantasy, and mythologies generated in and by their culture of origin. So this is a Western gaze. With the writing of Dracula, the novel, Stoker invented not only a character myth, but also a place myth, which is Transylvania and its castles, and its castle, Castle Bram. Although the Castle Bram has no connection whatsoever not even with the historical Dracula. Although more than 200 movies have been made presenting the character Dracula, and over 1,000 books have been published on this subject. The vampire subculture, part of the Gothic, larger Gothic subculture, has entered Romanian culture only after 1989. The first translation of Dracula has only been published after 1989, and this was only because of political reasons. And this was a matter of cultural policy, since the communist state was very reluctant in accepting the Dracula myth penetrating Romanian culture. See the long commentary by Dakan Light. After 1989, the reluctance of the state in accepting Dracula Tsepesh wasn't so visible anymore, although certain unease at the beginning of the 90s about the connection still lingered. In the meanwhile, Dracula tourism flourished, and the cult of popular Dracula sites exploded. For example, Sighișoara and Blan's Castle are favorite icons of devotion for Dracula fans. The Romanian state was caught up in a typical identity versus economy dilemma, and finally, tourists won. Well, this is my presentation for today. Thank you very much.